And so when we're looking at the one big beautiful bill, originally the House version did have the defunding of Planned Parenthood, or the defunding of organizations that support abortion for 10 years. In the Senate version, that was reduced to 1 year, and and so we don't really know, what's going to happen after that. We pro-lifers, we are going to need to hold our U.S. House members and U.S. senators' feet to the fire to continue to defund Planned Parenthood. But there also are exceptions in the funding of Planned Parenthood, or the funding of abortion, and what the government will pay for. And these include not only the life of the mother, but also the health of the mother as well. And health can be a very broadly defined term, and we don't know who is going to. You had some good questions about this, Ricardo, earlier, coming up with, who's going to define what standards, what organizations are going to be paid, how they're going to be paid. How are we going to determine this?
That's correct. And quite frankly, as pro-life organizations, we need to be laser focused on getting answers to those questions.
Yes. Yes. Do you want to
And
just go over some of those questions that you presented earlier?
I'll be glad to. So, for example, number one, what does the law amend the criteria, or how does the law amend the criteria by which organizations are prohibited from receiving reimbursements? In other words, I want to see the before and after. And you already mentioned one, in terms of the carve outs. Second item I had a question about was, what are the requirements used to identify the prohibited organizations? In other words, how do they come within the purview of being rejected? Next question is, what are the qualifications by which prohibited activity, in this case we're talking about elective abortions, are allowable for reimbursement? And you mentioned one of the biggest loopholes, that is the health of the mother. Another question I would have would be, who or what organization can make a claim that an organization should be prohibited from receiving reimbursement? And what does that process look like to bring a challenge? In other words, can we, as you as Personhood Florida down there, us up here at Georgia Right to Life, here in Georgia, can we as organizations challenge in either an Article 3 court or an administrative court abortion providers that are misusing our taxpayer funds? And another question I have along those lines is, which role within the federal government agency overseeing the disbursement of funds will make the determination as to whether or not an organization is prohibited from reimbursement from Medicaid, for example? Because it's one thing to say, oh, well, we made a law and it's prohibitive. I want to know who's responsible for overseeing it so that I can track to see whether or not they're doing their job. And I think the last question I had was, does the prohibited organization have the right to an administrative appeal? And what are the details of that process? So again, if I bring an administrative challenge on behalf of Georgia Right to Life against, let's say, the Planned Parenthood down in Cobb County, then does Planned Parenthood have the right to an administrative appeal? And what does the process look like, so that I know if they essentially initiate that process, then I have an idea of what I must do to defend my position and hold their feet to the fire?